Welcome to Boundless Pursuit, a weekly podcast providing motivation, entertainment, and education to anglers and outdoorsmen. I hope that the stories you'll find here will encourage you to chase your passion more fervently, to open your mind to new opportunities and perspectives. Your engagement and feedback is critical to the growth of this show, and I would love to hear your suggestions on topics or potential guests. You can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com or at my website, www.boundless-pursuit.com. That's where you'll find all related articles, media, and merchandise. Please remember, the show will gain traction from your support. Be sure to like, comment, and share this podcast to your friends and connections. I'm your host, David Graham. Now let's get on to today's episode. You know, in keeping with the theme of intrepidation and just diversity, today's guest is hot off the trail of a phenomenal 2022. And along the list of my personal bucket list, one of the more attainable might be the pursuit of lake sturgeon through the ice. And in searching that topic, I ran across today's guest, Jake Didier. A talented carp angler and sturgeon connoisseur, Jake boasts some very impressive catches, and he masks the smile of a very happy angler behind a gnarly, unkempt man beard. But in following Jake, it's like he had some kind of reckoning, and he went absolutely ballistic the latter part of 2022. He threw all caution to the wind and headed to South America, to Bolivia, to chase his dream species, the arapaima. And that's just a dream destination for many of us, myself included. And flying back to the States, he didn't let the jet lag get to him. He didn't slow down at all. He immediately set his sights on Texas for the mighty alligator gar. And with a narrow window of time on what was essentially just an extended layover, he managed to catch not one, but several of North America's largest predatory species. But there was no time to waste, because from there, he essentially carried on out west and headed to Idaho with his sights set on yet another giant freshwater fish, the white sturgeon. So in very short order, one after another in rapid succession, Jake managed to knock out multiple freshwater monster fish, capping off an amazing year. I had an awesome time talking with Jake, and his passion for the sport is genuine and undeniable. And I think the way that he articulates that in this call is easy for anybody to recognize. And just being that this is all so recent, the newness and the freshness of this experience just rolls off the tongue in conversation, and he paints a very awesome picture of a guy that's still early in the stages of his travels, and what I'm sure will be a lifelong endeavor of travel and fishing going forward. If you have any interest or hopes of answering similar calls to adventure, I know you're going to enjoy listening to this one. Don't ask me to speak French. Or hi, I barely speak proper English, so. But all right, well, Jake on the lake, Didier, welcome to the show. Glad to get you on here. I've been watching your stuff for a while now on the outside looking in. At first, I knew you as like the carp guy. Then I knew you as the guy that's catching sturgeon through the ice. I'm like, that's gonna be my, because I went through this period kind of like middle of last year where I got this idea in my mind that I really want to go catch a lake sturgeon through the ice. And then I found you. I'm like, I think I always want to have like my guy, you know what I mean? Like somebody I reach out to, somebody that seems interesting, somebody that seems like down to earth and relatable. I'm like, that's going to be my sturgeon through the ice guy. And then I don't know, dude, we'll get into it. I want to start with the sturgeon thing, but dude, you went on a freaking tear last year, and we got to get onto that. But man, let's start with the sturgeon thing, or at least let's start with how did you progress as an angler to catching these big old sturgeon through the ice?
I mean, I still haven't caught a truly big one myself, but I put my friends on some good fish, and I put the hours in. Maybe it'll happen. We got a few seasons left for the year. But when I was younger, I think as the same with everybody, we started off with our panfish and our bass. Yeah. And the specific turning point for me as an angler that I remember is I was down at this Lake Lahamadu in Alexandria, Minnesota, fishing with my brother in this boat tunnel, and we would tossing these craw tubes, with the jig heads pushed up in the middle. And we were out there chasing bass with the little craw tubes and everything, little young craw tubes, casting them into the boat tunnels, as kids do. And I hook into this big old carp, and it just tears right out of the boat tunnel and just keeps going into the main lake. And I was a young kid at this time. I was probably about 8 and just learning about drag and all this.
Yeah.
But I remember going home, going on the internet, and that night kind of was just a turning point. I started fishing carp. I found the carpanglersgroup.com, all these forums back in the day. You remember forums and all that.
Oh yeah, and you will find me to this day. You can find me on the Carp Anglers group making posts. So I remember that. Yeah, I remember Carp Anglers group pretty well. I was intimidated by that crowd because
they got serious.
Yeah, they know their stuff, but I was on that forum. That was the glory days of fishing media.
100%. Yeah,
like that
100%.
that was when everybody went to the internet to like find and share information, not find and share how to like be a Insta celebrity. I miss those days. But anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent here.
But yeah, I mean, that one fish, I came back and I started joining those forums, and ever since then, I've always been more or less chasing the adrenaline and the bend of the rod than the actual, sport fish. And I kept progressing from there. And I want to say it was 7 years ago, I took my first trip to the Rainy River. Initially, first time to get a sturgeon through the ice. Was unsuccessful, but I went back again that spring and I also brought the kayak, if I remember correctly, my first year. And I got the sturgeon in the kayak, just a small one,
Oh, that's cool.
So that sent that snowball effect into motion. And yeah, to this day, sturgeon are my number one. I will hit those the first points of the year, April into May. Then the flatheads now, and got bit by that flathead fever 2 years ago. That's been a big time waster. A lot of hours on the river there.
But, yeah.
And then, it just keeps snowballing. You keep looking for that next bigger bite. And as of like this year, I was dreaming of catching arapaima since I was a kid. I think a lot of us who grew up watching Jeremy Wade or any of those shows have always dreamed of arapaima. So, I mean, it was prior to COVID. Steve Ryan had posted, he's an editor for In Fisherman and whatnot. Hey, does anybody want to go on arapaima trip? I was like, God, I'd love to go, but I can't afford it right now, But out of curiosity, I messaged him, how much is this going to cost? Well, heard the numbers, knew I couldn't make it happen, but then here comes COVID, And then, I think a lot of us who were working in the retail industry or the food service industry, I took, we were getting that surpluses or whatever. So I saved that, invested that, and then 2 years goes by. Steve Ryan posts again, like, hey, who's still serious? Well, now I got the money, so I'm not telling you no, right?
Right.
But yeah, and then from there, it just kind of everything just seemed to kind of work out. The lady told me, hey, I see you're going to be going through Houston on your flight back, So she's like, what if I drive to Houston, meet you at the airport, pick you up, and we go to the Trinity River? So perfect,
I have a lot of questions about each of these type of fish. So I want to get into all of these things in depth, mostly because I feel like I'm a step behind you as far as like making that leap to do, because you've done. I'll just throw this out there, like on a global scale of all the places in the world that there is to go fishing, Guyana, like, and that trip you took is my number one. And I feel like I've sort of been in like right there as well, where like maybe the finances were there, but then I lacked the discipline to not spend it on something stupid, or maybe the finances there, but the COVID thing came. And now I feel like there's nothing in my way. So I really want to deep dive on that, but I don't want to get away from, I don't want to cannonball straight into that. You know what I mean? Because like I said, you obviously worked your way up to that level, but the sturgeon thing is it's one I keep coming back to. these are lake sturgeon, right? Because I mean, I
Yep,
can say
lake
sturgeon, and
sturgeon.
people are going to wonder what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Lake
lake
sturgeon,
sturgeon.
and I mean, are you doing that? I want to talk about this because you
Mhm,
obviously you do it from boats, you do it from the bank, you do it in a lot of
mhm,
different ways for these lake sturgeon. But I'm really interested in the ice fishing for them. And
mhm.
now I'm seeing these photos that you're posting of what looks like a little like custom built shack. I mean, tell me about that thing. Did you build that yourself? I mean, has that like been like a
No,
nice little passion project of yours? Like, where'd that come from?
I essentially I got tired of what most sturgeon anglers do. They're gonna set up a hub, they're gonna put their foam floors down like inch tall foam mats, their heaters, their everything. And I was doing that. I've been doing that for 5 years now. I've been ice fishing sturgeon. And it just, as you get older, it gets more backbreaking. So the opportunity came along from a buddy to trade. Well, I had a bunch of stuff he wanted for my fishing gear. And I was just like, well, I'll trade you this portable and this for this, fish house and throw you $500 or something like that. So I think I'm into this fish house like $1,500. But then I went and bought, we typically have 10-inch holes, they're about like that, and then you've got your covers on top. And I just wanted something, I could drop it down. I could cut. What we do is we Mickey Mouse these holes for sturgeon. So you'll cut your initial hole, then you'll cut two ears essentially and overlap them. That gives you that much larger hole. So I went and I got these 18 by 20 boat hatches. I cut out the floor, threw those boat hatches down. So now I just got some very large holes to try and fit some very large fish through.
Yeah. Well, I mean, did you, have you ever had a situation? I don't know. I'm like some guy from the South. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it drops below 60, I'm like shivering. So like ice
Yep.
fishing is something that I know I'd struggle with just because I'm like a little pansy in the cold. But
Oh,
I
we
was
got
like,
gear for people like you.
I have to experience it because it's like it's such a different kind of challenge. But I like when I look at ice fishing pictures,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like it just looks like you're this open, massive expansion of just white. How do you find the fish? Like, how do you determine? I mean, I'm asking like ultra novice questions here. Like, and I'm imagine a lot of people listening, like, you know what I mean? Like, tell me like you're teaching someone who's never done it before. But like, how do you determine where you're going to stop, set up, and drill a hole in the ice? Like, how do you know where? Like, you can't see features. It's just a big old sheet of ice.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, especially up here, our popular app is Navionics.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of guys will have their Navionics or they'll have their charts right on their fish finders and whatnot. But for sturgeon specifically, what I target is early season. There's a popular hole. There's always is. We got a warm water discharge down there. So
Mm-hmm.
that brings the shad and early season a lot of sturgeon to that area. And then later in the season, as that progresses, they seem to pull off that. So then you're starting to look at your maps and you're trying to find these little defining features, these little holes, or say a feeding flat. Like just recently, I decided I'm done with holes and I'm going to try and move up into this 20 feet of water, this large flat, and
Yeah.
see if maybe they're moving up in the evenings. So there are ways to find structure, and especially now with the change in technologies, we have stuff like Panoptics. I think you guys use it down south a lot for your bait fishing and
Yeah.
everything. I watch guys like Milton; he goes and catches shad with the cast net with them and stuff. But we have tools at our disposal, I guess one would say, to find these structures, and then even then, sturgeon fishing is kind of a lot like muskie fishing in a way that you are putting in hours and hours of time for maybe a bite. And like specifically, one of my friends, Ella, who has probably been the hottest hand on the ice this year, or Elena, I should say, my bad. She's just recently got a 67-incher through the ice this last
Golly.
weekend. Just nuts, like insane. But what did she tell me? They have 393 hours on the ice so far this season, specifically for sturgeon. And that's crazy. That's a lot of hours.
Oh yeah.
So you can have all the tools at your disposal when it comes to sturgeon and still come line short or just get on them too. So it comes
Now,
down
how
to a
I mean,
level,
like
yeah.
the other thing like when I look at the videos or look at pictures, I'm always kind of taken back by the small little rods and reels. But you're talking about a fish that gets like, I mean, what is like the top end size of one of these things?
Top end size, the biggest we have, and uh, probably a popular fish, one could say. We've got the state record fish that just comes through consistently, and she's 77, 78 inches long.
Mm.
So, that's 110, 120-year-old fish, and, over that 100-pound range. And then as you said, you're bringing them in on these little short rods that
Just,
are, in their best case scenario, like at the very longest, they're 48 inches. Most of these guys are fishing 36 to 42. So you can imagine the lack of a length of the rod. You really feel those head shakes too.
yeah.
It's fun. Not gonna lie.
Well, I just wonder, like, when they're heading like away, is your line not like peeling over the side of the hole? Like, is it cutting into the ice? Like, I mean,
That is very much a possibility because especially as the season gets later in the year and the ice gets thicker, early season you can just bury your rod in the ice and you're fine. But there was a time we had a 48 inch and we were battling through the ice, but we had like over 2 feet of ice. We got to the point we were taking off our coats because this Power Pro, we were fishing 40-pound Power Pro, was just burning into the bottom of the ice and just catching, catching, catching. And that's,
yeah.
good way to lose a fish. So we got our shirts off and it's cold. We don't have the shack out or nothing. We just drove down there to sit on the ice, and yeah, we got our shirts off. We're down in the ice, but down to our shoulders, and yeah, it can get wild. A lot of variables in fighting those guys.
I always wonder. Well, you know what? Maybe people do this. I should have looked into it. It's like when I look at those holes, and then I just think like I just see line almost to the point of being able to, like, because ice can be sharp. I'm like, can you get cut off by the ice itself? And like, why would they not make almost like a liner that you could pop in the hole, like a plastic?
A
Do they
lot
have
of
things
guys
like that?
they'll chip away at the bottom of the ice, but I mean, in all reality, in my experience, usually you sit in a spot long enough that it's naturally kind of smooths out from the warm air warming this
Mm,
water up here, and
yeah.
I've never personally lost. I can't say that I've ever lost a fish to an actual cut in the ice. But the nice thing about our Mickey Mouse holes, as I was kind of describing earlier,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're not so much going straight down, you're going at a slightly outward angle. And that allows, to give that extra taper, which helps turn that fish on the way up and prevent, of course, line getting caught in the ice.
Well,
So,
I would be so concerned about like going out there doing that, hooking into the fish of a lifetime, the one you've been waiting on your whole life, and then the damn thing doesn't fit through the hole. So you're just watching it within arm's reach and can't get it out of there. Like, like,
oh,
oh my,
yeah.
grab
If
the saw. Like,
Yep. There's actually videos on YouTube. Our state record fish was caught on video, Darren Troseth,
yeah,
but he got it up to the hole and they actually had to drill. They were just fishing just a side by side hole, so two
yeah,
by two hole. And I think maybe he fishes a 10-inch auger. So you're figuring you got a 20-inch hole there. But still couldn't do it. They had to drill 3 or 4 extra holes, call somebody to come help them drill holes. And yeah, it's happened. It definitely
yeah.
has.
Well, man,
So
maybe that shouldn't be the worst thing. I mean, I don't know. I can think of a lot worse situations happening. Like, I don't know. I went straight to that, but like more so when I think of ice fishing, like I think of like some of the hazards. I don't know. It's probably ignorance or just like thinking into it too much. It's just like people who ask about, aren't you worried about alligators down in Florida? I'm like, not at all. But
yeah.
I like think of ice fishing. Like I see people drive their vehicles onto it. I mean, how does that work? Can you just access these lakes from anywhere? Do you drive down like what's normally a boat ramp during the warmer seasons? Like, is there
Yeah.
designated like ice access points? And like, how do you determine if it's safe or not? Is there like government officials that say you're permitted to
That
enter the ice now? Like, how the hell does that work?
Sadly, that's not how it works. It's pretty much,
It's
you
probably
know,
better. You don't want too much
don't want
government
too
getting
much
involved.
regulation. We've
Yeah, yeah.
already called the land of 10,000 lakes and 10,000 laws. So,
Right. Yeah.
but no, it basically comes up to your own personal judgment. There's some people that'll go out earlier than others, but it's always a risk. And ice is never truly safe. There's times when I will, like right now, I'm confident. I have a lighter rig. Most places I've been hit pretty hard with the cold this past couple weeks, and despite the warmer weather now, it's still going to hold pretty well. But there's guys that I know that won't even be driving out on the river this year for that reason. So it very much comes down to you got to go out, test your holes. You'll see guys, they'll come out. We've got some of them got the ice readers that just measure the thickness of the ice. Otherwise, we'll chop holes, chop holes, check. Because going down is not a fun situation, usually not covered by insurance, and it's very costly. So
Yeah. Well,
definitely.
what gets me too, I don't want to venture off topic, but it's like this one keeps going through my head. I see the pictures and the videos where people go like, what do you call it? Spearing, gigging,
Mm-hmm.
getting them with like a pitchfork and sturgeon.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, are you seeing these things swim past the hole? Is it really that kind of visibility? I mean, or is that more
I
like a
can't I
shallow?
can't speak too much to the Winnebago system. That's
Yeah.
the only place where the spearing happens. But I do know that the Winnebago system is quite a bit shallower, and they
Okay.
target those main channels and whatnot. So, I mean, I've watched the documentaries and you see them come through pretty well. But where I'm fishing, you're in 20, 30 feet of water. You don't see them.
Yeah.
Uh, there are some rivers around Minnesota that have sturgeon that may offer sight fishing opportunities for them in the future, as well, specifically like the Otter Tail River we have is one of our growing uh, kind of projects to bring the sturgeon back, and we're starting to see some pretty decent fish come out of there. Even during the ice fishing season, we got a lot of guys that are pulling them out of the Otter Tail chain, and could possibly be the next recreational fishery within our state.
Yeah.
So,
Well, so like, I don't know. I think of an animal that can get that big. Like, what is like the hardware you're working with? Like the kind of hook that you're contending with what could be like 150-pound fish. Like hook, bait, like the kind of hardware you're putting, because it's just interesting to me. You're kind of fighting them vertically. So there's
mm-hmm.
so much torque, I'm guessing, being put on the fish. Like what are you having to put down there for these fish?
Typically it's smaller than one might think. A lot of these guys, it's a growing sport as it goes.
Mm-hmm.
But for the past few years, a lot of these guys would just grab, your little walleye spoons, because the goal is, where we're fishing, there's not a lot of current. So sturgeon being sensitive as they are, as little weight as possible. So right now, specifically, I'm fishing with half-ounce sinkers with a bunch of beads to a small J hook about yay big, just enough you
Okay.
can pack with a bunch of worms. It's not as big of gear as you would expect. Your main heaviness is in your rods and stuff. That's where you see your actual weight. But like line, 30 pound line is very common for these ice angling guys, and they're using 3,000 and 4,000 series reels. So typically, those size reels, if you're getting 20 pounds of drag, you know, you're doing pretty good. I'm
Yeah.
fishing with 5,000, so I get that 30 pounds of drag, but you can get them with that lighter stuff, and a lot of people and a lot of the big fish come that way. So
I'd rather play it safe. I ain't gonna be
yeah,
throwing a
I'm in the same
light
boat.
tackle. I mean, what are these things fighting like? I mean, are they ripping off a bunch of drag? Are they just kind of rolling around? Is it like what is it? How? I mean,
A
is it more like
smaller
a catfish, or are these things like a shark?
So I find it so funny. There's like an almost defined line on, your size of the sturgeon. A sturgeon smaller than 48 inches will always sit there and just do this
Yeah.
and just shake its head and, whatever. If it gets bigger than that, somehow, it's like a trigger gets flipped and it's just like they're drag burners. They can just, give you head shakes that dang near rip your arm off. And, at some point when they're running, they're dang near unstoppable. It's pretty
Yeah, yeah.
crazy. Like, I don't know what it is, but I've caught fish that are literally 3 inches in difference, and they fought night and day different. It was wild.
No, that's awesome. And those things are so cool looking. Like, I don't know. It's,
Mhm.
it's, I want to do more sturgeon fishing as it is. I actually kind of have some loose plans right now to do the white sturgeon thing in March if nothing falls through with that. I mean, I've got the time. Well, with me, it's more or less, will I have the experienced person to accommodate me, or am I going to have to go out there and like just totally DIY it? Because one way or another, I want to knock that one off this year. But
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it was pretty easy to DIY. One thing I will say, like our first night, we weren't fishing with any locals out there. That's when I lost my biggest fish,
yeah,
and that was an experience. But it's if you've catfished, you can sturgeon fish. Big thing is when you go to Idaho, you got to follow those rules and regulations. They're very strict on
yeah,
their
yeah.
rig and the fact that the weight has to be able to break off and whatnot. But man, most of those spots were like we fished Swan Falls, we fished Salmon Falls. Were very accessible for the shore-based angler, and I'll be going out there probably. I'll fish a full lake sturgeon season before I go out. Probably late May is when we're going to be going out.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah,
But
it slipped my mind that you it slipped my mind that you got the white sturgeon too. Like I wanted, like, dude, you just like
oh
knocked
yeah,
him down. Like it was so awesome to like watch. I was like, what is this dude is on a freaking tear? But like I'm chomping at the bit to get to those parts, but I don't want to do it without honoring, like, because the critical thing in these kind of conversations for me is like how you laid the groundwork for that. You know what I mean?
yeah, true.
Like I don't it's
Mhm.
I don't like listening to these kind of programs where it's like somebody just dives straight into the home run. I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
but like I can't do that. Like, but when a lot of times what I've noticed with doing this whole podcast thing, like seeing the layers of people, it's like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even realize you had all that going on. And it's
Oh yeah,
impossible to know if you just exist only in Instagram. Like you don't know people. You know what I mean? But
right.
you have at least given enough hints that like you've, I don't know, overcoming things, or you're having some kind of like awakening. But the carp fishing thing, I don't want to get away from the carp fishing thing because I'm right
Mhm.
there with you with the carp. And it was funny when you were describing the first time you like encountered one or saw one, because I like it like took me back. Like I had these like vivid images in my mind, bass fishing at a local golf course pond with my brothers the first time I encountered a carp. And it was like this, it
Mhm.
was a giant grass carp. You know, they put these grass carp in these
Oh
golf course
man, yep.
ponds. And I looked at it. At first, it didn't even register to me. Like I'm like a 10-year-old kid. And I thought I saw scale pattern, but this thing was like as big around as like, well, when you're 10, everything looks bigger. You know what I mean? I thought my dad was 10 feet tall and, but like this thing looked so big. It might have been like as heavy as me. I was a shrimpy little kid. And I see these
Yep.
scale patterns. I'm like, and it didn't even click to me that was a fish. And then it moved. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? My brother started telling me about carp.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
my brother Matt's like, oh, that's a carp. That's just a trash fish. I'm like, what are you talking about? That thing's as big as a whale. Like, I don't care about these bass. So my mind went there. I don't know. It's a character
Yeah.
thing. Some
It's kind
people
of like
will,
a splitting moment
yeah,
between of how it works. I
right.
got buddies, same thing.
I hit that like crossroad, and it's like, I don't know, man. You can resign yourself to the bass and the sport fish world, or you can like become enamored and interested in all that's out there. And for me, like before fishing, I was just like, oh, like obnoxiously crazy about animals in general. So anything that moved always got my interest. But the carp thing, man, I went way down that rabbit hole. Maybe not way down the rabbit hole. I've done plenty of it, but I've been impressed with the way that you do it, because like in like everywhere I've lived all over the southeastern United States. We moved all over the place. But most of the
Mhm.
places I've gone, you have no limitation on dumping bait in the water, putting 10 rods out if you want, like just like bombing them. But like, is it correct? I was reading one of your posts one time where it's like
Mhm.
you have to fish like one rod at a time, no pre-baiting, none of that.
Mhm.
I'm like,
Exactly.
yeah. When it comes to carp fishing, man,
Minnesota
that's
is not where you want to do it. I mean, that is very true, but we also have some pretty unique fishing opportunities for them. But I mean, it just makes you adapt, you know? I
yeah,
mean, so you find these, say you find a duck pond or you find these areas where people are already feeding the geese. Well, that's already going to bring fish. So, and there's some carp anglers that'll play in the gray area. You know, a lot of our DNR officers will allow these pack baits as long as they're attached to the rig, they can be used, but you can't just take that same pack bait and throw it out
yeah.
and do it. So I mean, there's days when I'll go down, I'll say, you know, hey, I'm feeding the ducks. I'm throwing them some corn, some bread, you know, whatever. Same thing everybody does, and then I'll go fishing the next day, you know, just to avoid that kind of thing.
So
But
all you need to do is fill up a giant mesh laundry bag full of corn and then just like zip tie it to your line.
there you
And then it's
go.
part of your rig. I'm like, hey, that's part of my rig. But of course, then you
Yeah,
have to reel
I
in a
think that
50-pound bag.
might get them a little bit. I think there's an
Yes.
amount. I think they if I started lumping chunks like that, they'd say something. But when it's just little stuff like that, I think they're all right. It again, it comes down to the officer that checks you, but usually, in my experience, you're respectful with the officer. You're educating them. You're showing them, you know, I'm not just throwing these out here to just bring these sport fish to me. You know, I'm fishing carp. You know,
Right. Yeah.
and and explain why it's helpful. You know, that the same conversation we're having here to show how this little bit of a dough bait changes your fishing. You know,
Mhm.
so as long as you're pretty good with that, they seem to be pretty good. So.
Right. Well, the other good thing with them is like once you kind of dial in a few good, solid, reliable spots, you pretty much know.
Yeah.
But I
Mhm.
love seeing your pictures though too. Like you've gotten like the kids heavily involved in it. It's become like a family affair. I'm like, and that's always such a good like introduction to fishing, like for a young person. I feel like because you get enamored by the big fish. It doesn't involve necessarily a lot of work.
Mhm.
So and they
Exactly
like
right.
they can go play down by the water. It's very inanimate. You're not, you're it's sitting and waiting, but it's also the opportunity to encounter the big fish. So I feel like
Oh yeah.
you're on the right. If you're trying to program the little ones, if you're trying to like you brainwash them, I feel like you're going about it the right way. So
Yeah, 100%. It's amazing the differences. We got friends who have kids that, you know, they can't really bobber watch,
mm,
but, you know, they just lack that, you know, the ability to sit still and, you know, be there and be in the boat for 8 hours a day. But you take them out carp fishing where they can run around, go to this playground, and all they have to do is listen for some beeps. And when the beeps happen, guess what? All of them, they're coming.
yeah,
They're running. They're rock paper scissoring for the next fish. You know, it's not exactly lazy. Well, it's lazy, but at the same time, it's not like they're not engaged in it. It's just that they
right,
don't have to can stay focused on it.
yeah,
So,
yeah. That's your job. So, but
mhm.
yeah, that's funny. Well, you know what? You mentioned it's hard for them or it's hard for kids to sit and stare at the water and bobber watch. It can be just as hard for adults. And I
Oh
think
yeah,
about that too.
100%.
I think I try to I get into these debates sometimes with people when it comes to like bait versus lures, which is oh, you're just a bait fisherman. It is a different set of challenges that I like. There's been times where I got humbled by bait fishing and I thought I've got the fortitude to sit on a chunk for hours. But I think the best example where I was like, man, this is eye opening is when I went carp fishing with my buddy Austin Anderson in Texas, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
this kid pulls these just monster
Those
fish,
big buffs, dude. Yep,
just
I've heard of
I
them.
mean, good God. And I've been
That's
watching
an.
him for years. I've been watching him since the Carp English group days.
Oh yeah.
He was like 13, 12-year-old kid catching these dang huge fish. And so I finally fished with him. Man, we fished for like 24 straight hours with nothing on this wind-blown little section of lake, wind blowing in our face. It's cold. It's just uncomfortable. There's no action at all. And by like the 12th hour, I was like, I admit it, I was breaking. I was like, damn.
Hmm.
I was like, I know I didn't just spend all this money on this plane ticket, come all this way. Man, we ain't catching nothing. This doesn't. And then like, but it was like, if I was alone, I think I would have tapped. But like him being there, like, and like being there, like, it was like a reassuring thing. Cause I'm like, he still seemed confident after all that. I'm like, I don't know how you're confident over there, cause this sucks. And then, but lo and behold, he kept telling me, he's like, I'm telling you, like, I've had these days. It's just a matter of time. They're going to come in. The other interesting thing is I was out there with Josh Dolan, and we had gone out there in the kayak and dropped, he had a camera, and we dropped the camera down there on, where we had dropped the baits, and left it out there for like 45 minutes. We weren't getting any bites. Then we brought the camera back up. We had nothing else to do but sit around and twiddle our thumbs. And like, so we, it was a good way to stay kind of interested, but we watched the footage. There were so many giant buffalo and carp down there. Like, they were there. They just weren't biting. So it was like, that was good and reassuring. But anyway, I kind of think of that too when it comes to your the sturgeon fishing, where you're staring at a hole like for hours and hours. So it's like, man, I get it. Like, the challenge of lure fishing, it's very physical. It's very much like you're keenly aware, like you're working. You're having to use your skills to fool a fish, but it's still a different, like, it's like equally challenging in a different way to have to sit and stare at a hole for hours and somehow keep mentally focused enough to stay optimistic, because it's like you gotta keep the demons away. You know what I mean? You gotta keep like that little.
That is so accurate. It is so accurate. Yeah.
A little negative, like pessimistic voice on your shoulder starts speaking. They ain't here. You're in the wrong spot. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know, man. I feel like you get forged. It probably makes you a better lure fisherman, honestly. It's like when you get a better mentality to be patient with that kind of fishing. So that's cool. I don't know, but I guess reluctantly I may come back to this sturgeon thing, because that's one I really want to do. But at some point, it's like you decided to just go on this wild 20. When I looked at, like, you're like, you like just went after it, like, and decided to go to all these different places seemingly out of nowhere. I'm sure that, like, it had been like in fantasy world in your brain. Like, it was just I don't know. It was just stuck in the bucket list, like dream mode. But just kind of walk me through like the process mentally of like making that decision, having the discipline to budget properly, and like making these dream trips actually happen. Because a lot of people like, only rich people can go do that, or, I'll never be able to do this, or just like give people some backdrop on like how you made it happen, starting with the Amazon trip.
I mean, I guess how is there a good way to explain it? I guess we started back when, that COVID thing happened. I just got my life back together. I had money, steady income. I've been working on my credit for a while, so I've been driven for the past few years, but also the past few years, I also realized I've been fishing less, and I haven't been doing anything different. And, so going down to Bolivia, that was an impulse, and I had the money, I had to, this guy, Steve Ryan, he's legendary, are you going to turn down that opportunity? No.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
That was the real start to it. And I guess I just realized, I've lost quite a few friends, and people, many of them younger than me, have just kicked the bucket out of nowhere. And I really started thinking about time and, when I can do this. I started looking at my dad, who has had double knee surgery by the time he was in his 40s. And I'm getting there, and I'm showing all the signs of that. So that was a big driving point behind it. But as far as budgeting, there wasn't any real budgeting involved. It was kind of, okay, let's go. And, we'll figure it out later. The Texas thing was great because it just happened to work out, and they had never seen the ocean. So it was a worthy investment for us. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to lie. We struggled for a little bit post Texas, it was tight, But for her to come all the way down there, we bring Harley to the ocean. We caught gator gar. We stopped in the Grand Canyon in Arkansas and those what do they call them? The Ozarks.
Yeah, yeah. I used to live there.
We we did so much, and we have a Volkswagen TDI, so it's not like fuel was a big thing. And when we were down there, we saved a lot of money in hotels and such by various sites, and the fact she was working at a Marriott prior. And I don't know, we just kind of just made it happen for the sake that we have just seen how life is changing. Everything's getting more expensive. We don't know even next year or this year if we are going to be financially as well off as we were last year. Would we be able to do these things?
Yeah.
Would we be able to do things the year after? So I don't know. I guess it just wound up getting impulsive, and I just got done wasting time, and I just wanted to do it. So when the opportunities came around, I just said yes.
It's funny. I've talked to a few. You're not the first guy, obviously. In fact, there's another guy I actually had on here, and he's from Naples. He's from where I live. Like, we live like 20 minutes apart. And his like thing was the same thing. He's like, oh, there's no real big story. It's just like at some point you just do it. He's like, I don't know. I apologize for not giving more of an in-depth reason, but at some point you have to just stop thinking about it, dreaming about it, talking about it, and just like, I mean, if you have to make a couple small little lifestyle changes, my bad habit is I like to stop at the gas station and buy like Cheetos and an energy drink. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if I added up all of those that I do during the course of a year, I could pay for these trips.
Oh, yeah.
And I got my wife 100%. Reminding me about that daily because she's a financial guru. So she's quick to let me know about all.
There you go. She'll figure out how to make it happen for you.
Yeah. So she's helping me with the discipline side of it and helping me feel guilty every time I spend money on something stupid. But I'm just thinking, like, it's so fresh for you. And there's guys that have talked to and I'm going to talk to that are more seasoned in their travels that are fun to talk to, but it's like, it's more interesting in that, like, this just happened for you. Like, when you're flying to South America and maybe you just kind of come through, am I in dreaming world right now? It's like during a lot of that flight, you're above the clouds. You don't see nothing. You're just sitting there. It's kind of like ice fishing. The anticipation's there, but you're forced to wait on this long flight and be alone with your thoughts. At some point, though, you get below the clouds. What is what's going through your mind when you start to like get closer and closer and closer to the canopy of the trees, and this ain't a dream anymore. Like, I'm here. Like, this is it's here.
That was exactly it. It was from the point I got dropped off at the airport to the point I actually landed in Bolivia. It was surreal. At any point, I've got this nickname Murph. So it's Murphy's Law. What can go wrong will, type thing. So I was just looking for these things. What's going to happen? And I actually did miss one flight on the way down. Oh. Thankfully, they had room in the next flight that my other fishing partners were on. Somehow I had booked an earlier flight before them. So it worked out. But, I've got, as I was a kid, I've had records and stuff. And I'm wondering, if I get to these gates and they're just searching my name, what are they going to find, that they're going to say, nope, you can't enter our country. What's going to stop this and that and this and that. I'm just like waiting for it, because in any of my trips, there's always an almost trip-ending speed bump,
Yeah, right. But that makes the best stories. Like, you need 100%. That.
Yeah, it makes the best memories, but it's just like to the point you almost turn back,
Yeah.
But it was a lot of that. But I remember finally, getting on this tiny plane. We had spent like a whole day in the city of Riber Alta prior to going into the rainforest. I'm just fighting at my teeth, like, I just want to get out there. What can go wrong? Why is this taking so long? We finally get out there. I'm watching the rainforest go. I got two seasoned anglers in front of me. I'm in the back, so I'm the smallest guy. I'm right next to all the gear. Everybody else is either just chilling or passing out. And you got me looking around.
Yeah.
And the pilot, he goes and just does that. He does a full 90-degree turn. We're looking at the ground. the two season anglers up front are dang near shitting their pants. I'm back here thinking I'm gonna die,
Yeah.
but
That
it
was like,
was
I'm
so.
glad you're describing this because like I can handle flying on big like commercial airlines. That's nothing. But when I look at those little planes, and you're flying around in a tin can over a bunch of like the jungle. I mean, and even in the big commercial airlines, like you'll hit turbulence, and it's like,
Oh
whoa,
yeah.
you kind of feel your stomach go. Like, I'm
Then
like,
I'm in the back of the plane and that's happening, man. And it just like there's points where it felt like you dropped 5, 6 feet. And I'm just like, I'm grabbing onto the old shit handles. I'm just like,
yeah,
no, 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 no.
yeah, right. See,
But ironically,
I'm scared because I get motion sickness on the ocean. It's pathetic. I'm like the consummate angler, but I can't go on the ocean because I get pathetically seasick. Like I'm talking about, I'll be 100 yards offshore, like I can see the land, and I'll start to be like, oh, I can feel it coming. I'm like, dude, nobody. If I start barfing in an airplane or something like that, be embarrassing. But so now,
yeah,
and then the airstrip. Tell me about the airstrip because everything I see, there ain't no nice looking airstrips. There's no like
no,
big fancy welcoming party. Like you're landing on straight dirt, aren't you?
yeah, I mean dirt and grass, sometimes when we had the planes coming in on the return trip, we're having to
Hissing the dirt.
push pigs off the runway and everything. And, we're landing right next to a village. So they use the landing strip for their soccer and their football, or I suppose that is their football and their games down there too. So, I mean, it was a unique experience. And then it's a rough landing. You bounce, you bounce, you bounce, and then you're flying by these huts and everything. And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
right in front of the plane, there's a hill that'll go down, that helps them take off at times. But you're wondering if you're going to go over that hill and
yeah.
all that stuff. But that was a fun experience. I've never been in a small plane like that. So
Yeah,
that
me
was
neither.
a wild adrenaline filled ride. And thankfully, when I was up in the air, it was the only time I had service while I was down there. So I'm texting Jen and, like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, it's shaking, I'm going to die.
Yeah, I'm
But
surprised you had service up there. Even that's pretty
yeah,
crazy. I
yeah,
would
it
just
was,
think you're off the grid or something. I know some of them bring like satellite phones or something.
yeah, it was surprising. In the air between camp and I suppose it's about an hour long flight between River Alta and camp, and it was that first 30 minutes from River Alta. Like even down in South America, I had good coverage in the actual populated areas.
Hmm.
So, I guess that's Verizon, but
Yeah,
depends
that's
what you
cool.
got.
So, are you getting to like mingle with the like locals when you get there, or people like, oh, great, here comes more of them gringos are here, or are you like
Well,
you
I
getting
mean, they were pretty welcoming. I'm not gonna lie. I still get messages to this day of people.
oh, that's cool, yeah,
We were big news when we got down there, and you got these people adding us. Like, hey, did you get any pictures of our hotel? Be sure you mention us. Yada
mm,
yada yada. And the actual locals in the actual village themselves too, very welcoming.
yeah,
The kids would come up to us and talk, and the chief's
yeah.
daughter had this little monkey she'd have on her shoulder and everything. It was a great experience, very hospitable. I had nothing bad to say about the people or anything. I mean, there were some of them that, you could tell were looking at you kind of funny, but
Yeah.
at the same point, you're
Look at that
walking
guy's big
around in South
beard.
America. Yeah, I'm walking around in South America. I'm having the time of my life. You're not going
Yeah.
to bring me down.
Right. Yeah.
The language barrier was a thing, but you do enough of this Spanglish and almost like charades,
Yeah.
and you're able to make it happen. And then you got your translators on your phone. So I mean, I guess that was the worst of it. Otherwise, everybody was so great. Our host that down there brought us back to his place. He's a doctor down there, and then he does the fishing, hosting, and whatnot. Brought us back to his place. We drank. He cooked us some beautiful, beautiful meat. Big old things of beefsteak, and oh, but yeah, it was cool. I gotta say, it was a life changing experience. I've always wanted to go down there, and makes me wish I would have listened in Spanish class because I never thought I actually would go down
Dude,
there.
I'm telling you right
But
now, I did Spanish from like third grade all the way through college. I manage a bunch of, Spanish folks. I struggle with it. It just, man, if I could be that's like the ultimate skill is to be bilingual. I want so bad to be able to communicate with different people, but like I would rather do like trigonometry or like brain surgery. I just could never figure out the other languages. It's a shame. But
Yeah.
so you finally get on the river, and is there like a particular agenda, or do you kind of have like the flexibility to like say, hey, I want to go try this, or do they say you're going to do this, that, and the other, and you pretty much are following, or
it was pretty much, we could tie our own rigs and whatnot. The guys were there to bait our rigs and stuff, give us help. They, being locals, had the spots already figured out. They'll bring us to our best holes and whatnot. But basically, the only real, agenda was, you get on the river, you give it on the lagoon, you'd fish a certain period of time, you'd come back for lunch. And this was probably my favorite part. Down in South America, they really do the lunch break siestas, where we drop off our camp chef at the beginning of the day at a certain section of river, and he'd clear it out within a couple hours. We'd go there, he'd have an amazing meal set up for us, bunch of hammocks strung through the trees for us to take a midday nap, fish if we want to from the boats down there, and then they'd be chewing on their cocoa leaves, laughing, talking, or napping themselves. And then you're back on it, and you're able to suggest, say, hey, I wanted to target big Zhao, we're going to go to a deeper hole, or I wanted to finally check off. Well, I didn't have to do it, but my first fish was a firewood sewer beam. But I want to go shallow now for these firewoods.
Now you're speaking a foreign language for a lot of people listening. Like, what is it? A Zhao? What is a?
So a Zhao is a Zhao. Okay, so Zhao is.
I know what they are, but I want other people to know because they're so awesome looking.
Yeah, a Zhao at the most basic description is like a giant flathead.
Flathead, yeah.
And then these sewer beam that I found down there, crazy fish. They're a species of cats, but they're beautiful with tiger stripes and just marblings and dots and everything you can imagine.
Right.
And these firewoods and these tigers, they're known to be more in these shallower sections, these snaggier areas. And specifically these firewoods, my first experience with this thing, I had no idea what it was, but sitting there in the boat the first day, line starts going off, cool, set the circle hook, turn the bait feeder off, and the thing just comes out of the water. It's a 3-4 foot fish. And I'm just cranking, and this thing's going so fast you can't even keep up to this fish because it's coming at you, it's jumping, it's coming at you. You think you lost it like 4 times, then it dives under the boat and it keeps going that way. But yeah, it's a freaking catfish that jumps out of the water. Like,
I wouldn't have expected that.
Backflips, everything, like, just blew my mind. But
that's nuts because like the pictures of them, they look like real streamlined and flat. Like the profile of them is like very flat. So when I look at that, I would have thought, okay, that's a fish that likes to hide under things on the bottom. So they probably dig hard to the bottom. But for you to say that they're jumping and going crazy, that's unexpected. That's cool.
It threw me for a loop, man. I for my first fish while I was down there, I've catfished my whole life, and I've just,
right.
to me, it was just going to be something I knew already, but just a little different, maybe a little bigger fish, different looking fish. But man, having one come all the way out of the water like that, and multiple times, each fish multiple times, like, it's not just one jump. It was very cool. I gotta say.
Are you doing any lure fishing too, or is that like Bolivia? I said Guyana earlier. For some reason, I was thinking Guyana. You went to the Bolivia. Are you doing more pursuing large catfish? And then obviously we'll get to the arapaima thing. But it's like, are you slinging lures? Do they have like the Payara or any of that kind of?
Yep, we were seeing Payara jump in these current seams while we were down there. Problem was, up in the mountains, say Peru and whatnot, they had just gotten a bunch of rain while we were down there. So the Rio Madidi, which is the river we were on, was very cloudy. you'll notice that like the river itself was like this fine silt. So it's just like, I don't know, you touch it and it's powder.
Oh,
It was crazy. So you can
okay.
almost imagine just a tiny bit of rain turns that into a complete chocolate soup. Like you weren't, if the fish was down 2 3 inches, you wouldn't see it.
Yeah.
A lot of these site-based predators were not, not really too much of an option. We were
Yep.
seeing the pyar jump in the seams, and the pacu. Maybe we saw a few dead pacu, but there's just no way to reliably target them. And so, I mean, during clearer seasons, when they talk about, the red tails being more prevalent in the river, or the Payara and the Pacus, it tends to be more early season prior to the rains and when the river draws down. So we went there in August. They would have said, the best time for that was probably their summer. So December, our time, around there. And then
Yeah.
you got rainy season, and it's pretty much opposite of the northern hemisphere here.
The
So no.
the bait thing is always a curious one to me. Are you like harvesting bait as you're going? Are you going into the river already with a stockpile of bait? Like, how are you getting
They
this?
definitely they had bait prior. I know common practice on most of these adventures is you can catch your own bait. So you catch it, like if I'm going to Suriname here in a month and I catch a peacock bass and I want to cut that guy up and use it for a big piraiba, that's going to be a thing. I'm bringing peacock rods. I'm bringing bait rods. Uh, they down in Bolivia though they already had everything harvested, and I
Okay.
think they go down to the main river with their nets and whatnot because they had a variety of species of fish that I don't even think we've seen in the river. Like we've seen bait fish in the lagoons and such as they were getting chased around, but nothing quite like they had in their coolers. So maybe they have a stockpile somewhere. Maybe they just go out in the mornings and cast them. I know one morning I heard of them going down and catching it, but other than that,
Yeah.
that's specifically we didn't have to worry about it. This one coming up, I think, might be more like that, where we will be taking advantage of off time to catch bait and whatnot.
Right.
So
Now, are you returning back to like camp at the end of each day, or were you setting up camp like as you trekked upriver? Like, I'm kind of curious, is like, what
no,
is
it
the
was
24 hours of the day looking like?
it was it was a lodge. So I mean, you had your main village, and then we had two nice little lodges side by side for your guests.
Mhm.
And I mean, they were nice. You got your showers, your two beds in each room, your two rooms for each hut. So four guys in each lodge, total of 8 guys can go on that trip. And yeah, I mean, you'd wake up in the morning, you'd go to the camp kitchen, have breakfast. Uh, Great chefs, by the way. Um, you'd hop on this tractor, and then you'd either drive down to the lagoons or you'd go further and hit the actual river. And then you're coming through, getting pulled by the wagon behind it and everything, rainforest above you. And then, yeah, you come back at the end of the day, they'll have supper ready, within about 30 minutes. So all you that time to clean up, shower, and then you have a nice dinner there waiting for you. And then it's repeat.
I'm like thinking too, like, I'm thinking like night before Christmas and a kid, like, and how hard it is to sleep. I mean, or were you sleeping well, or were you like having a hard time sleeping?
I mean,
Too
how
much
can you
excitement.
really?
Yeah.
I mean, there were days that really, the heat helped. I I had a roommate that was a snorer who
Oh
always was able
yeah.
to get to sleep like that. Luis, if you see this, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but but no, for me personally, I did not sleep well that entire week, and you know, once you went, it was deep, it was to the point you felt you passed out,
Mm.
you knew it was good sleep. You got up, you were good. So, I mean, and I thrive on, low hours of sleep. I'm no stranger to that. I wake up at 5 a.m. no matter what time I go to sleep.
Yeah.
So, I was no stranger to that, but man, it didn't stop. The adrenaline and
Yeah.
the just almost ecstasy of being down there, and the fact that you're there and what tomorrow's going to bring. You know, some of these guys, I know the other guys slept well, but me as the one of the newer guys in the group,
Yeah.
definitely did not. So
Right. Well, then obviously at some point the key objective, or like that high mantle fish, the dream fish, like the queen of the river, was the arapaima. Now these things are
mhm,
living like they're not so. I mean, obviously they're in the river, but like you're not targeting them in the main river, right? You're going into
mhm,
these
mhm.
marginal lakes. How are you getting into those lakes,
Well,
lagoons, whatever you want to call them?
most of them are pretty easily accessible. The one that I spent the most time on was literally right on the road on the way to the river, and probably their oldest existing lagoon, because the river moves back and forth every year with your those highs and lows, and that's how these oxbows are made.
Yeah.
And but there was others, they have access to these hundreds of lagoons, but only I think it was like 4 or 5 of them actually had trails made to them for the tractor or something like that. Because if you were trying to access them from the river, you gotta go upriver, then up a hill, then you're in the lagoon, and they just haven't had boats there yet. So as we go on through the years, I'm sure the lodge I went to will continue to have more and more of these lagoons
Yeah.
accessible to them. But yeah, it was bushwhacking. They might have bushwhacked prior, but some of those lagoons, I think the longest tractor ride was about 20 minutes or so. So I mean, you went a good distance into the rainforest, and that they had hacked down to get to these, you know, little what looked like little ponds, but at some point, I brought my deeper sonar down there, so that little wireless circle thing, and I had dropped it down into this one that's that furthest lagoon, and in some areas I marked 20, 30 feet.
Oh yeah.
So that, I mean, that's pretty crazy that, you had a river that was 20, 30 feet deep, but get entirely cut off from another section of the river. I found that pretty wild, but
So
kind of
obviously you get into these lagoons, and is it all about like quietness, stealth? I mean, are you trying to like not be noticed and you're scanning the surface of the water? Like describe like the hunt for these fish. Like, I watched the videos, the pictures, but it's interesting to
so
me.
the my first experience, as we're going out, I'm watching these guys, and none of these boats have motors. We're paddling through. Obviously we're trying to be as quiet as possible. You got my first morning for arapaima was just glass calm, and just you there's nothing, and you had this slight fog above the water, and you'd hear these fish. They're out there popping and popping, and similar to as a bowfin would come up or
Mm.
another air-lunged fish, and you'd just be listening for that, and you'd hear them all around you. But you go out into the lagoon, and your main thing we were looking for is like overhanging branches, and we had these like grass mats that would literally grow on the surface of the water out into the river. So underneath this grass is literally a whole world of fish sitting down there,
Yeah.
and you're fishing the edge of these grass mats, and you're paddling up there real slow, and you're dropping this bait in this specific spot, and then you're paddling backwards real slow again.
Okay. Oh,
And
that's cool.
it,
So you're
it was
dropping the baits, like placing.
yeah, a lot of the time, yeah, we
Because I
would
was
either
curious,
play.
like, are you waiting on them to roll and then like launching a cast their way, or how's like I was
Yeah, a lot of that did happen. My two biggest ones actually came from, just letting it sit on bottom. And one, we happened to be moving because we had no action. We better go down to this area. And I picked up the rod, started cranking, and it just damn near pulled me out of their dugout, and they're like, fish. I was like, well, I didn't fall out for no reason.
Tell me about the first one. Like, there's gonna be the big one, but tell me about like it finally happens. Like, walk me through that. Like, just like, do you see the line go out first, or is like you don't even have time? It just boom.
Well, my first one, I lost because
No, I would
yeah,
cry.
my
I
first one
honestly
I
think I'd
booked.
cry.
Yeah. I was upset because I had brought these wire leaders for Pyara, and then the guides, they were like initially tying our rigs, and they're like leader, and I'm like, okay, here you go, and they picked it out of my box, and then they tie it on, and I get this scream and run. I cast it underneath this overhanging tree, as arapaima like to go for these birds, monkeys, whatever falls in the water, and it
Monkeys.
just screams off, and I can feel it went underneath a log somewhere and
Oh,
kept going. But I'm trying to, stop it, and eventually the leader pops. Bert pulls the clip right out of the back end of the leader. And I was heartbroken. I was literally so mad at my guides for a while there that I went. That was probably the only point of the trip that the ecstasy really like fell off. Like it broke me.
yeah.
So they were asking for another leader as they were tying on another one. I'm like, no, let me tie my own rigs. I
Oh,
tied my
yeah.
own rig from there then on. I'm just like,
Let
nope,
me
not having
own
that
my
again.
failure. I get that, man. If I fail, I want to be mad at myself.
100%, 100%, especially on a fish of a lifetime.
Mm.
But then the one I actually caught, my actual first one, is the one I was just talking about. We're moving spots, and I pick up this rod, and I just, happen to go like this, and then all of a sudden it's going like this, and
Yeah.
I'm over the edge of the boat, dang near, because we're tied off to a tree, and they're quickly trying to untie it and paddle me out there because they want to stay on top of the
Yeah,
fish.
yeah.
It was basically the goal. And man, it was.
Oh, you went mute again. Hang on. Okay, now I
Oh,
hear you. I hear you.
cool. I might have to find me a charger here pretty quick.
It's all good. If you want to run over and grab one, it's all good.
Yeah, I'm gonna go get that right now quick.
All right.
Oh. All right. So again, where we're at, hooked up, I've got a picture of me. My guide accidentally zoomed in while we were doing the video. Which he got the fish jump and everything, but then he zoomed into the point where most of the rest of the video is junk. But he got my face at like the perfect moment when this fish is just powerhousing it and just going and going and going, and it's running for these trees on the edge of the lagoon, and they're yelling at me, drag, 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 and I'm like, I'm trying. I'm only 150 pounds, 160 maybe on my best day, and this fish is just like pulling and pulling and pulling, just bringing me a new one, and it jumps, man, and that jump to this day is still like my favorite moment. Like it sears into your brain.
Yeah.
They come out of the water, and their gills flare out to the point. They have a section gill plate. So they have their initial gills, and they have like another almost second gill plate there. They just flare that out, and they're coming out and just dancing. Oh man, heart's just pounding thinking about it.
Yeah.
But oh, life changing. I don't think I can fully describe it to any sort of extent that actually does it justice, especially if a person wants to catch an arapaima.
Right, right.
You can't describe that feeling and that energy until that person's actually there doing it. How can you? It's surreal. I mean, at its most basic descriptive form, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the more you describe it, I can kind of get to the point where I feel what you're describing, and it scares me because I know how much of a mess I become like when I get like within proximity to those lifetime catches. It's like all composure is lost. My skill is gone. So I know I'm like so worried, like if or when I make this trip that I'm going to fumble it because I've become such a bumbling fool when I'm at like the hands, like when it's like when that moment is there. But
just deer in the headlights.
What always freaks me out is the landing process, because a lot of the videos that I watch, it's always like right in the thick stuff along the edge of the bank. Like it seems like that's the most critical moment, because it's jumping in limbs. You got one guy holding the line, like grabbing the actual main line to control a fish. It just seems like the potential to lose them there is so great. Like I know
Oh
I'm
yeah,
going to be freaking out.
and
Like
trust me,
how'd you get when you got your hands on it? Like what was that like?
I mean, first thing you got to understand is, you are completely right. You're landing these things among trees and you hop in the water and there's sticks down there.
Mm.
There's sticks and there's possibilities of freshwater stingrays. We caught stingrays in the rivers. So there's entire possibilities there in the lagoons.
Yeah.
But they tell you, if you're in the water, you got to drag your feet. Don't lift up. You're dragging your feet through these sticks and sticks are cutting up your shins, but you finally, like, the guides go in first. They get their hands on this fish, and you're then allowed to go in and get in the position. And I remember kissing this fish because it's what I do. I love to kiss my fish, and I was just full in the moment. I screamed and I howled.
Yeah.
I'm sure that my party heard me from the other side of the lagoon where they were fishing. And I kissed the top of this arapaima's head. They start freaking out because an arapaima is a bony skulled fish, and all they got to do is, take a breath of air and pop it up, and boom, you're got a concussion essentially.
Yeah.
But man, it just couldn't resist it.
Yeah. They probably, yeah. I always look at those pictures. I mean, there must be like a strict liability thing going on there because you never see somebody in the water alone with the fish. It's like you're always with the guide or with somebody else. And it's like, I almost would want that. I don't know. Maybe
I
afterwards.
think if we were to ask, they would definitely would. Out of habit. As long as that fish is fully under control. Mm-hmm. But out of habit, and just for the fact, it's a 6-8 foot fish. That's how you get them up and out of the water for the better picture is why they stay. But like at post pictures, I got to handle my arapaima, swim off with it. That was just a moment for me and my fish. I'm carrying it out. Guides are back there on the shore. I'm carrying it out, and you swim off with it. Say goodbyes, and I'm shaking just thinking about it. I want to go back so bad, but I want to do the Guyana thing like you're saying. The arapaima are bigger down there and all that. Then you get the real jungle experience where you're going from upstream and you're working your way down.
Yeah.
Would be
that's the one that I'm going to gun for really hard, hopefully this year. But this
November, let's go.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking is I'm thinking like, this fall. It's like it's got to happen. I had a little setback on my passport. They didn't have some information they needed. So I'm like, oh, no. But I mean, I got all year. So anyway, though, not about me. And I know, we have taken so much of your time talking about that, but it's like, that was only part of your year. And what blew my mind is you said this is August. So you're late in the year. Like you're at the tail end of the year and you had only just really scratched the surface. And we're segueing out of this Amazon thing quick. But I feel like you did a great job of like, I'm like enamored by the idea. Like I can like your passion for it and your energy about it is evident and like authentic.
It was life changing, man. I plan to keep going. I really, really, really enjoyed my entire experience down there, and it was so worth it.
Well, the fact that you left there, and then you go straight for alligator gar, like you go from like one of those global titans in the arapaima. And you come straight back to the home front to like, I mean, imagine you're riding on a high. So like the optimism's there. There's probably a lot of like, I don't care because I already got my arapaima. But then you go straight after the alligator gar, which I've done that scene. I've been there and I understand it. And you just knocked that one off. So I guess, man, obviously maybe not in quite as much detail, but kind of tell me how that went. I mean, hooking the first one and maybe if you lost any to bring in one of those bad boys in. And maybe compare and contrast between the two species. I think that'd be kind of neat.
I mean, Texas gator gar, that one was definitely more of a family vacation dynamic. So I wasn't hitting it as hard. There was opportunities to go harder and say fish into the evening and such. But we were there with my 9-year-old, I'm sorry. and we wanted it to be enjoyable for all of them. So like we said, when we first got there, we went down to Galveston first. My girl's never seen the ocean. And I'm near water. I'm going to try it. So we wound up going to the pier. We knocked out the black drum. We got a few black drum while we were out there. And it just blew my kid's mind. She was having such a good time. She got to see her first shark get caught, by a guy on that pier. And then, that was just a stepping stone. Then we go upriver towards these gator guard, and we're finding, all these areas. We stayed up at the preserves out there. I forget what town it was, but just south of Livingston Dam, about an hour. So, that's where we went gar fishing the most, as that seems to be a very easy spot to go for your first time.
Yeah.
And we did very well. We didn't get any giants, but we used Henry Martin's small hook method. Small hook, setting the hooks right away. I think we only lost Jen's fish. Jen had a real nice one that probably would have been the biggest one of the trip, and it got into the current and got off. So, other than that, our hookup ratios and everything were quite good. And then, but we were taking it slow. There was times when it was raining and stuff while we were down there, because we happened to go down there when that rain was hitting and the water was getting high at the end of the year. So that led to some problems, where we had to take cover. Thankfully, I thought of bringing our shanty thing from up here and had that with. So we had a place to stay dry. But I didn't grind as hard as I did in Bolivia, for sure. It was more or less just, we're taking full advantage of this while we're here. And, if it works, it works, which it did. I'll still be going back, so I'm going to grind that river. I'm going to get a big one out of that river. But just to check it off the bucket list, a small, I think that fish was 5 or 5. Yeah, I think it was 5 foot on the dot. I want to say it was like 60 or 64 inches. And, nothing fancy, but we got a couple of them that big. Maybe one was a little bigger. We stopped measuring them, but no true giants.
Well, you managed to get bait, and that's always sometimes that can be the hardest part about that whole freaking thing, right?
That was not fun. The one day, because we came from Galveston, so the one day we were down there on the pier that night, and we happened to see a guy cast netting these mullet, and he's got so many more mullet than he could ever freaking use, and I'm just like, can I have some of those? Just out of nowhere. He's like, yeah, take as many as you want. So I'm like, fucking fill this freezer,
Yeah.
We still burnt through that, and then we had to go back and get more. So we had to drive from, an hour south of Livingston back down to coastal Buc-ee's, because the coastal Buc-ee's has all that bait and whatnot.
Yeah.
We could get some more mullet and go back up, because we found this little back road bait shop that actually had cut up carp and whatnot.
Oh, that's interesting.
But we bought them out, and it was they didn't have much. So I'm just like, well, at least it gets us some. We didn't have any prime cuts, and you could probably say it was past its best used date. It was getting to the point it wasn't fresh no more.
Right.
But we were able to find bait, thankfully, and then I think basically just enough bait to fish into that last day. And when we ran out of bait, we were content. We were ready to go back to the Airbnb, get some rest, and then start our trek north in the morning afterwards. So,
yeah, that's cool. Well, I know, I've had trips down there to Texas where getting the bait a lot of times is the hardest part. Finding a bait shop, finding it's nice that you can at least be near the coast. You might be able to find some markets or fish markets or some commercial markets that might have something fresh on ice. But dude, it's like, it's almost even worse when you get to the river and you see the fish. Like they're there, they're rolling, and they're like around. I've had this happen to me, giant ones, and you don't have bait. You're like, oh no, you sit there fishing, trying to catch bait in the midst of all these giant fish. It's like eats away at your soul.
Yeah,
man. So you knock off that species. So you go from arapaima to, and obviously some of the catfish, to the alligator gar. Did you go straight to Idaho? Well, I know you did some travel like through the Ozarks and things like that, but essentially you're working your way to. Oh, you went home first.
Yep, we had a few weeks back home. And then my lady, she happened to have an opportunity for a work conference that was actually out in Washington or Oregon. I'm sorry. So it just happened to realize it skirted the Snake River. So I'm just like, I'm not doing anything. I had walked out of my job in August saying, screw this, I'm going to pursue better later on. I just took the last half of the year off. Let's go. Let's try and check this one off too. So we did. I mean, it was just basically the same thing. The stars aligned. Everything felt right. Granted, we kind of regretted it when we came home because, we come home and the bathroom needs a repair. We have a leaky ceiling. Thankfully, it didn't, bust, but, and then now it's ever since then, it's been planning for Suriname here. So,
yeah.
Been just consistently rolling, I guess one could say.
Well, I've loved watching your stuff. Like, I don't know, man. I looked at like your tail end of year 2022 was like, dude, this guy's a monster. Like he's just a switch went off and you just started blasting, like knocking them down like bowling pins. The latter part of the year, arapaima, alligator gar, white sturgeon, like keystone megafauna, like global titan freshwater fish. But now, it's well, I always ask this question too. I want to I think I already know the answer. But like when you come home back to your home waters, like after being on this high of catching these things, can you still enjoy that just as well doing what you've always done?
I say I do it pretty well. Obviously, I think once you get a taste of what's out there, you're always going to be craving what's out there because there's always another bite that you haven't gotten on. And that's always been my thing, I get in my, my comfortable species. I've got my home water fish. I'm still just as in love with my carp and my carp fishing. I actually just opened up that guide service here this year to start taking customers. So one can definitely still very much enjoy it, but man, you just don't forget it. And it's always there in the back of your head. Like right now, I'm sitting here ice fishing these white sturgeon, and I got these buddies out in Idaho catching 7-8 foot, or I'm ice fishing lake sturgeon. They're catching white sturgeon, and they're catching 7-8 footers. I'm just like, do I just sell this fish house and fly out there for a little while?
Yeah.
But at the same point, you take what you got. I think, as I've told you, we're looking to transition into moving to Texas. After being down there and enjoying the surroundings and seeing the opportunities they have down there for both me and her, I think it's a feasible option for us. So, I mean, one could say I'm not satisfied anymore, but at the same point, I very much am. I still got my fish I love. When I move to Texas, I'm still going to fly up here for the fish that I love, the lake sturgeon, the shorthead red horse.
Yeah.
And to see if my bones, if we move down there 10 years from now, I fly back up just to catch my little koi carp again, see how big she is. Well, never know.
There's no reason I don't think it ever necessarily, like, you don't need to feel guilty about ever wanting to pursue growth, or I think the adventurous mindset or the adventurous soul is going to get restless from time to time. I've found myself being that way. We've moved so many times. I've moved my family, I feel, too many times, but I mean, I feel like we're in paradise now in Florida, so I'm good to stay here. But I tried for Texas. I don't know if my wife wanted to live there, but for me, it was always like Texas or Florida. I was like carpet bombing the job market with applications between those two states, and Florida called first. But so going into this year, now your eyes are set on Suriname. We're talking about Suriname, and your target, your primary target there is what?
Piraiba with well, we are going to get red tails as well. So those are two of them that I have been very anxious to check off the list. Probably the most intimidated, probably more intimidated than I was in Bolivia now.
Yeah.
I've been watching these videos of these guys just breaking rods and just drag streaming runs from these fish. And it really makes you scared and wonder if your gear's going to hold up. You really suck to get down there, and everything you got breaks.
Well, the general consensus I've heard from a lot of like those international traveling anglers is that those piraibas are like top tier, top level, hardest fighting freshwater fish on the planet. So, man, I can't wait to see that. I don't know. You're riding into this year with some hella momentum off of
yeah, hopefully we keep it going. I got a lot of big plans this year. Like I said, I'm going back to Idaho for sure. That one's happening.
Yeah.
If everything pans out well, I want to be in Guyana for my birthday, November 25th, doing that whole arapaima tour up and down the river, that whole multi-species tour. So if that pans out well, we can maybe almost duplicate last year. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, we'll have to stay in touch with the Guyana thing, because if, things kind of stay parallel, who knows? Maybe we'll share the bank up there. And I got to pick your brain regardless about like, hey, what kind of gear should I be bringing? Like, I get so worried I'm going to show up there with inadequate gear or maybe I'll overpack or I'll underpack. So, that kind of thing. I want to pick people's brains who've been there and done it. But I know we're winding down on time. I heard the misses in the background earlier.
Yeah.
Maybe you got chores you got to go do. I don't know.
Oh, no.
I got chores I got to do. But
I'm going to go sit down. I might have a drink. It was a long day at work.
Yeah.
No, the kiddo was asking if she could have Oreos for dang sweet tooth. But yeah, man, I mean, if Guyana interests you, I got the guy. He runs Amazon River Monsters. His name is Mark. He's a good friend of mine. I'll be fishing with him here in Suriname, and then hopefully returning with him. And again,
I believe I'm friends with him on Facebook. You're talking about Mark Bolton, right?
Yes, sir. Yep,
so I've explored that whole market and looked at the different options. So I know that one's on the table. But I know you mentioned earlier. So I want a lot of people. Man, you're a good storyteller, by the way. I feel like you really like. I know sometimes it can be frustrating. Like I get that way. I'm a big writer. I like writing. Like I feel like I can put my thoughts into words much better. I do a lot of blogging. And sometimes it's like, I want to express the way that I feel and the way that I'm passionate about this fishing thing. And it's like, it gets like hard to do, but you've done a really good job with it. And, some people are going to be listening. Some people can see you, and I can see like the authenticity, but people who want to see, yeah. people who want to see this stuff, I want you to just kind of like, I don't know, maybe like where they can find you. You mentioned that you're doing some guiding, so I don't want to let you off here without mentioning how they can get a hold of you if maybe they want to do some of the carp fishing that you're doing. But like, where can they find you? How could they contact you? Name of the guide business, all of that.
I mean, Jake Didier on Facebook. That's probably the easiest way to go about it. And then on Instagram and TikTok, I'm Jake on the Lake, But Facebook is where I do most of my posting. It's where I can get more one-on-one with my following, and as well as post the more personal stuff, one could say, that you wouldn't post on Instagram or TikTok, that you don't want the masses to see. But if you have a small following and friends, then you'll see that. So a lot of Harley's fish you'll see on my Facebook, not so much on TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Instagram's real limited in how and what you can share. So that's awesome. But man, I appreciate you coming on here. And I'm like, you're one of them top guys that I'm kind of quietly or not so quietly watching from the sidelines, because it's motivating. You know what I mean? I have my own.
I appreciate that, man.
I have my own aspirations. I know a lot of other people are in the same boat where they're right there, they're right on the edge of wanting to make these trips happen. So it's like, you were one of the guys I really wanted to bring on because you just did it. Like you just made it happen. So it's fresh, it's new, and you're still going with it. So that's awesome, man. But yeah, I appreciate having you on here. But,
hell yeah. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, dude. This will be a good one.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. I can't wait to watch it. I'm going to be watching your last one again tonight. I missed the last episode, but we'll be on it tonight, giving it a rundown, see what it's all about.
I'm trying to throw a lot of diversity in there, and you brought some good diversity.
The last one, what was that? A gator attack survivor?
Yeah.
Was the last one? Yep.
That was a really cool one. That was different. I've got some other people lined up that have similar things. But anyway, man, appreciate having you on here. I'm going to let you get to it. Thank you for listening to the Boundless Pursuit Podcast. If you enjoyed this show, your feedback, comments, and reviews are very important to me. Also, this podcast is just one element to a much bigger content outlet. I urge you to head over to www.haverodswilltravel.com, where you'll find audio, visual, and written editorial content. That is 3 dimensions of awesome fishing content brought to you by a very dynamic team of anglers. I hope that you'll tune in next week as we continue to build this program and have interesting and skilled anglers each Thursday. Thank you for listening.